Well, welcome back everybody, and thanks for stopping by and checking out our next video in the MPLS Layer 3 VPN section. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at our next topic, which is going to be the iBGP VPNv4 Full Mesh setup. Now, I've labeled these other two topics as done because they're done. We've talked about them already. So let's talk briefly again about why we need the VPNv4 process. We already talked about how LDP is needed to get us from point A to point B inside of the service provider core. So ingress PE to egress PE, for example. We've already established that. What we need to go do now is do a full mesh of iBGP VPNv4 peerings. So we're going to start on CSR1, we're going to peer to CSR6, CSR32, and then XRV9 and work our way around all of the PE routers. Once we have all the PE routers established and we have the peerings, then we'll be able to go through and finish out the config. So that's going to be how we go about doing that. Now, I'm not going to keep the full mesh config only for the simple fact that it's just not scalable. Because the reason why we wouldn't keep it is because for every additional PE router that we might add in the future, let's say for instance we added another PE router up here, let's say CSR7 and then maybe XR12, for example, just throwing some numbers out there. Then that means that every other PE router would need to also peer with every other PE router. So it's in n times n minus 1 over 2. So basically, or at 2 minus 1, something like that. But anyway, the point being is it would be in every other PE router peering. So CSR1 would have to peer to every other PE router inside of the MPLS core. We don't want to do that. It's easier for us to go and can basically templatize the configuration with route reflection. But we're going to take care of that in the next video. So before we take any more time trying to discuss what VPNv4 is trying to do, we're actually going to go through and get it all set, configured, and operational. And then we'll focus on the route reflector design and go from there. And then we'll break down how it all works behind the scenes. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll go ahead and grab the configuration. So the VRFs are already configured, ready to go. So I'm going to start off on CSR1, and we have BGP Autonomous System 100. So I'm going to go in here and type in router BGP 100. Now there's a couple of different ways that I can approach this. We have the first way where I can go in here and I'll do it the old-fashioned way, where I'm not doing the manual configuration. What I mean by that is I'm not going to disable the BGP default IPv4 Unicast peering. So if I do show run all section BGP and I look at the top here, it's somewhere in this config. Right, where is it? Right here. So it says BGP default IPv4 Unicast. So what exactly does that mean? That means that anytime that two iBGP routers are configured, or eBGP routers for that matter, they're automatically going to form an IPv4 unicast peering with each other. That's the default IPv4 unicast. Now, that's going to be one of those things that happens automatically. You don't have to do anything. Well, I'm going to configure that on CSR1, but on CSR6, I'm not going to do that. I always disable the capability because I want to control when a iBGP or an eBGP peering should come online. That's just how I am about things. That's what I think you guys should also be doing as well. So we're going to go ahead and configure that and get that squared away. So I'm going to type in neighbor of 1.1.1.6, remote AS is 100. I'll specify the update source is going to be loopback 0. And that's it. That's all I have to type in. Now I can type in the address family, VPNv4, and then I can go ahead and activate the adjacency. That'll bring that peering up once I configure CSR6. And let's go ahead and do router BGP 100, no BGP default IPv4, and then neighbor of 1.1.1.1, remote AS of 100. We're going to go specify the update source is loopback 0, and then the address family VPNv4. We're going to go ahead and activate the peering. So give that a moment or so, and we should have an iBGP peering set up between CSR1 and CSR6. So if I take a look at the config, you're going to see that I've turned BGP default IPv4 unicast off. I have a peering to 1.1.1.1 or CSR1, and I've sent the community extended. This is a command that's automatically added, and this is going to allow the exchange of VPNv4 route information between the PE routers. There are going to be certain aspects of the information when we start talking about BGP, whether it's a PE to CE routing protocol or some other routing protocol like OSPF, VIGRP, etc., that will be exchanged in BGP extended community values and then sent across to the remote PE routers, whether it's directly to it, like we are now, or through a route reflector design. So we have that. Okay, so let's go back and take a look at CSR1's config. Do show run, show run section BGP. Well, it's a very similar structure, right? But you'll notice that I don't have the IPv4 peering turned off. Notice how we formed a, as soon as we brought the VPNv4 peering up, we had a topology, we had a capability change. So if we do a show BGP IPv4 unicast summary, notice how with the IPv4 unicast address family, we're sitting at idle. And if we look at the VPNv4 unicast all summary, here we have it's up. Because there's multiple address families that can be deployed on a per neighbor basis. So you have to just have one adjacency, right? You have one neighbor you peer with, and you have multiple address families that you can peer with. So here we have VPNv4 that's up and running. And because on CSR6, because we're not sending IPv4 traffic across the wire, that's going to be how that comes into play. If we jump out of global config, show BGP IPv4 unicast summary, notice how I don't have anything configured. So CSR1 shows it here because we didn't disable the capability no BGP default IPv4 unicast. Let's go ahead and do that real quick. Router BGP 100, no BGP default IPv4. We're going to go ahead and let that synchronize, do its thing. And if we go back to here, it eventually, once they go back and forth, they should synchronize, and this eventually should go away. I may have to clear the adjacency or the peering to clear the capability. If you want to know more about that, you can go in here and type in neighbor of 1.1.1.6, and you can look at the capabilities exchange right here, neighbor capabilities. You'll see the address family IPv4 unicast is advertised. But you'll see that the capability of address family VPNv4 unicast is advertised and received. This means that we are going to, we've advertised and we've received, and basically we've negotiated this specific capability inside of the BGP peering information. And if we look at CSR6, the same concept will apply. Show BGP VPNv4 unicast, or I'm sorry, unicast, IPv4 unicast neighbor of 1.1.1.1. We look, and there is no IPv4 neighbor, so we have to do VPNv4. Unicast neighbor, unicast all neighbor of 1.1.1.1. You'll notice that we're receiving IPv4 unicast, but we're not advertising it. Therefore, we will never try to attempt to form a peering with them. We'd have to go underneath the IPv4 unicast address family and enable the capability. So I just wanted to cover that real quick since it was right here in front of me as we were going through. So we're going to go ahead and continue the config. I'm just going to speed the process up a little bit now since we have the rest of the config in place. Let's go ahead and focus on getting that squared away. I'm going to go back to CSR1 and take a look at, I disabled BGP IPv4 unicast, so you'll notice that I have this neighbor here. Let me go ahead and actually turn that off. So I can come to here and I can type in no neighbor activate, and then jump out of global config, and then this peering, this should go away. Actually, let me unicast summary, and now it goes away. So now if I do a show run section BGP,
I should be able to go and set up connections to the other router. So router BGP 100, neighbor of 1.1.1.32, remote AS of 100, the update source of loopback 0, and then I'm going to also do to .9, 1.1.1.9. Oops, I meant to do this first. .9 and .9, and then I have to go underneath the address family of VPNv4 Unicast, and I have to come in here to this guy, and let's go ahead and activate, and we'll do .9 activate, do show run section BGP. Now we have all our peerings. We have CSR6, XRV9, and CSR32, and then we have them all activated. So if I jump out of here and do a show BGP VPNv4 Unicast all summary, I have my 3 peerings, right? I'm waiting for 9 and 32 to do their thing. So I'm going to go to CSR6 and do the same thing. Go to global config, router BGP 100, neighbor of 1.1.1.32, remote AS of 100, and the update source is loopback 0. And the same thing with .9 and .9. There's that. And in the address family, VPNv4, go to 32, activate, and then 9, activate. And now I have to go to CSR32 and XRV9 and configure them. Now, one thing that I'm going to do on CSR32 that I did not do on CSR1 or CSR6, I'm going to go and do some configuration scaling options. So I'm going to use I'm going to show you the peer group for a variation first, which is the older option, older capability, and then I'm going to show you the templatized variation. So I like the templatized variation more than I like the peer group because the template option, in my opinion, provides a little bit more granularity. So let's go ahead and jump into the config, router BGP 100. Well, I'm going to type in no BGP default IPv4 because I don't want to accidentally form an IPv4 peering. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to type in neighbor, and I'm going to configure a peering to CSR1 via peer group. So I'm going to type in, you notice this tag here? This is the peer group. So I'm going to type in the neighbor I'm going to type in is going to be CSR1, or I'll just type in iBGP, and then I get to type in the command peer group. Now, I've created the peer group, right? I created the shell in which you'll map commands to. So now I come in here and I have to specify what it's going to be. I'll type in remote AS of 100, and I'll type in the update dash source is going to be loopback 0. Okay. Now I can go to here and I can type in neighbor of 1.1.1.1 and peer group of iBGP, and I can type in address family IPv4, or I'm sorry, address family VPNv4. Let me go turn this one off real quick before it causes me a problem. I'll type in neighbor of 1.1.1.1, and I'll go ahead and I'll activate it. And there's that. So the adjacency should come up here momentarily. And once it does, whoops, that'll come up. I'm being patient for the moment. Okay, I waited about 30 seconds and the peering still hadn't come up, and then I realized the loopback information was incorrect. So if we look at CSR1 and we do a show IP route for 1.1.1.32, it's not in the table. So go back to CSR32, interface loopback 0, IP address of 1.1.1.32/32, and we'll go ahead and that'll be that. And you can see the LDP adjacency is going to pop up now to 2 and to 3 here momentarily, and then the peering comes up, which is what you'd expect to see. So now we go back to CSR1, we have that, or sorry, CSR32. And we do show run section BGP. We have the peer group configuration that's working all day long, and that's exactly what we'd expect to see. I'm going to go And now I'm going to type in router BGP 100, and then now I'm going to use the templatized variation. I'm going to type in the template of peer session. The peer session is going to be things that are going to happen globally. When I mean globally, I mean in this portion of the BGP configuration. This will not be an address family specific configuration. I'll type in here, I'll say iBGP session, and then I'll hit the enter key, and underneath here I'll type in remote AS is going to be 100, update dash source will be loopback 0. I'll exit out, and now I have to create the template of peer policy, and I'll call this iBGP policy. And then underneath here I would type in other things like, well, I'm just going to send community extended and stuff like that. If this was a route reflector, I would do the route reflector configuration right here, or right here. I could do a bunch of other capabilities as well, but we'll come back to those in a different video. So I'm going to just configure that just so that there's something there. I'm do show run section BGP. You'll see that up here at the top we have the policy and the session. The policy is the send community extended. The session is the remote AS config. So I'm going to type in neighbor of 1.1.1.6. And instead of typing in peer group or the remote AS, I'm going to type in inherit and peer session and then the iBGP session. Like that. Now I type in address family, VPNv4, and then I come up here to this portion right here. I'll type in neighbor of 1.1.1.6 and I'll activate it. But when I activate, I'm also going to type in inherit peer policy, and the policy is going to be iBGP policy. iBGP peer iBGP policy. I don't technically need it because it'll already be up. So do show run section BGP. It'll already be configured because it'll already have the send community extended command associated to it. I don't need to go and add that. Okay, so that doesn't need to be there out of the gate, but I did it anyway just to be a little bit more thorough. Now, we've done all three CSRs. Now we need to go focus on XRv9 and go and configure him. Similar logic applies. Let's go jump over to XRv9. And actually, let me exit out of here and type in neighbor of 1.1.1.9, and then I'll type in the inherit peer session of iBGP session and address family VPNv4, and I'll come in here and do the activate, and then the .9, and I'll do the inherit peer policy. And it says that general session commands, oh, peer policy, my fault. Peer policy iBGP policy. So do show run section BGP. We can see that it's been applied, so on and so forth. So we have that configuration squared away and ready to go. Again, this command right here is actually technically not necessary, but for completeness, I'm just putting it in there. Technically, send community extended is being added twice. So let's go over to XRv9, and we're going to go ahead and configure him. Oops. So we're going to type in router, do show run router BGP, and no configuration exists at the moment. So router BGP 100. The first thing we have to do before we do anything is we have to go underneath the global config and type in the address families that we want to enable. So initially, I'm going to show you something real quick. Address family VPNv4 Unicast, VPNv6 Unicast. If I went to go ahead and commit this, it does work. Okay, so it does work. So there have been times in the past where if I didn't... Okay, so it's working here. Okay, cool. So there have been times in the past where I've worked on other older versions of XRV code or XR code, 6.0, 5.3, 5.2, where I wouldn't have been able to do this configuration. It would have bugged out, and I would have had to enable the IPv4 unicast peering or unicast capability. But this is the global routing table. So in this case here, it's not the case, so I'm okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and type in neighbor of 1.1.1.1, and I'm going to configure CSR1 as just a regular configuration, and then I'll do a couple different other variations. I'll show you the neighbor group, and then the address family group, and the session group, and all that type of stuff, so you guys can see the different variations to it. Remote AS of 100, update source is loopback 0, and then address family VPNv4 unicast, and then that's all I have to do. Show config real quick, and we can see that that's the syntax. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to commit this config. We have that going for us, and then after, let me actually go to global config here and log address family VPNv4 unicast log. Oh, well, let me do a log. Okay, well, it came up, obviously, and we have a 9, so let's go ahead and do this. We have peerings to all 3 routers, which is what we're expecting to see. Now, an XRV9 to CSR6, if I was to go in here and say, I'm going to do a couple of options that I have available to me. I have session group. The session group would be on a per session basis, just like we saw with the peer session configuration in iOS. And then we have the address family group up here, where we have the ability of doing things on a per address family group, IPv4, VPNv4, etc. We also have the neighbor group command, which is per neighbor, but I rarely ever use that. I usually use the session group and the address family group, which is what I'm going to use here. I'm going to type in session group. The session group here name is going to be VPN, or I'll type in iBGP session, and we can come underneath here and type in remote AS of 100, update dash source is going to be loopback 0. There's that. And then I can come underneath here and type in AF group, and it's going to be, in this case here, I'm going to use the iBGP VPNv4 command, iBGP, and hit the enter key. And then I had to specify the address family this is going to apply to. Address family, VPNv4, and then unicast. And then I can add whatever commands I want, like send community extended and things like that. So send the command, the XR doesn't work quite the same way. It would be some other options that I could throw in here if I wanted to. Next hop unchanged if we're doing enter AS option C, or carrier supporting carrier, soft reconfiguration inbound, things like that. But for right now, I don't really need the syntax because I'm not doing any route reflector configuration or anything like that. But it's there in the event that I need it. So if I look at the show config, I've got a lot added, right? I have the session group applied, so now I get to type in here neighbor of 1.1.1.6. I hit the enter key and I type in use session group, and then the session group name is going to be iBGP session, and then I can come underneath here and type in the address family VPNv4 unicast and come underneath here, and then I can specify whatever I need to. If I do the show config now, it's a little bit more complete than it was, and I can go from there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to commit the config, and what will end up happening momentarily is I should get a peering to CSR6 now that the configuration is in play. So once that happens, normally it takes a little bit longer in XR, and there it goes. So there's that. So do show run router BGP. That's the syntax, right? We have, can get a little involved and stuff like that, but for the most part, not too terribly difficult. So now we have the
CSR1 and CSR6 defined, and if we do show BGP VPNv4 Unicast summary, we have those both of those peerings are squared away. So now we need to go and do the neighbor of 1.1.1.32, and I'm going to go ahead and just configure another one straight up. Remote AS of 100, update -source is loopback 0, and address family VPNv4 Unicast, since I don't need to have anything specific. You just go ahead and commit the config, and we're squared away. Give that about, I don't know, 15-20 seconds or so, and then we should have a peering to CSR32, and our full mesh of peerings is squared away. And there we are. Excellent. So that's pretty much it. So let's jump out of global config, show BGP VPNv4 Unicast summary. I have all three peerings up. Now the reason why I keep specifying summary is if I didn't, nothing would show up. So I would have to keep that in the back of my mind as I'm configuring things. You can't just do, unless you're learning routes, you would never see anything populate. So that's how that works. So we have our full mesh configuration in play. Now, in terms of the need for VPNv4, again, I'll reiterate it again just briefly, that whenever we learn a route from a customer, that inside the VRF, we need to have a way of allocating a label for those learned routes. So the BGP VPNv4 process is what does that for us. Now, if we were doing VPNv6, that process would apply for IPv6 routes. Since we're not doing that, we're not going to touch on that quite yet. That'll be something we cover in the future. But we have the VPNv4 process. So whenever, for example, CSR1 or R13 propagates a route to CSR1, CSR1 is going to learn that route, and then the VPNv4 process is going to allocate a label for that customer learned route, and then that label information is going to be populated, or I should say propagated, to all of the nodes, all of the other PE routers. So that CSR6, CSR32, and XRV9 will all know about it. They receive that information, and so when they have traffic that's going to R13, they will use the label value that CSR1 allocated and then advertised to the remote PE routers. Simple as that. There's really nothing more to it than that. So that's pretty much it for this video in terms of how it operates. When we look at our next video where we do route reflector configuration, CSR4 and XRV10 will be our route reflectors, and we will go ahead and get them squared away and configured. Until next time, guys, thank you so much for stopping by, and we'll catch you guys in the next video.